It was a bright, sunny morning, the kind of day every bride dreams of for her wedding. The air was warm and filled with excitement as the guests arrived at the grand venue, a luxurious hall decorated with fresh white flowers, sparkling chandeliers, and soft, golden lighting. Everywhere you looked, there were signs of joy and celebration. Laughter and chatter filled the air, as family and friends gathered to witness one of the most important days in the lives of Sarah and Daniel. Sarah stood backstage, her heart pounding in her chest. She had dreamed about this day for years, but now that it was finally here, she felt more nervous than she had ever felt before. As she stood with her bridesmaids, who were wearing soft, pale blue dresses, she couldn't shake off the feeling of unease that had been building up inside her for weeks. Everyone around her seemed so calm, smiling and ready to walk down the aisle. But Sarah felt as though her whole world was about to change in a way she wasn't prepared for. She glanced at herself in the full-length mirror. The dress she wore was stunning, a delicate blend of white lace and satin, sparkling with thousands of tiny beads that shimmered as the light caught them. Her veil, long and sheer, flowed down behind her like a waterfall of soft fabric. She looked every bit the beautiful bride she had always imagined herself to be, but there was something else about this moment. A secret that Sarah had kept hidden, not just from her guests, but from her soon-to-be husband Daniel. Sarah's hands trembled slightly as she adjusted the lace on her dress. She had never been one to keep secrets, but this one was different. It wasn't something she had chosen to hide. It was something she felt she had to. It was the kind of thing that could change everything. The kind of thing that, if revealed at the wrong time, could shatter her perfect day, her perfect wedding, and perhaps even her future with Daniel. But she had no choice. It was her secret, and today it would remain just that. As she looked out of the window, she saw the guests beginning to take their seats in the large hall. The music had started, a soft melody that set the tone for the ceremony. Sarah's heart raced, her mind swirling with thoughts of what was to come. It was time. Her mother walked up to her, smoothing down the back of her dress. "You look absolutely stunning, sweetheart," her mother said softly, her voice filled with emotion. She brushed a stray lock of hair from Sarah's face and kissed her forehead gently. "Are you ready?" Sarah nodded, though the truth was, she wasn't sure if she was ready at all. This day, this moment, felt both overwhelming and surreal. It had been a long road to get to this point, a road filled with love, laughter, and challenges, but nothing had prepared her for what was about to happen. She could feel the weight of her secret pressing down on her, like a heavy stone lodged in her chest, making it hard to breathe. As Sarah stepped out of the room and into the hallway, her bridesmaids surrounded her, offering words of encouragement. "You're going to look beautiful walking down that aisle," one of them said. "Everything's going to be perfect." But Sarah couldn't focus on the compliments. She wasn't thinking about how beautiful her dress was or how perfect the day was supposed to be. All she could think about was the secret she was hiding under her dress, and how, in just a few moments, the entire world would know. The sound of the organ music swelled, signaling that it was time for the ceremony to begin. Sarah's heart skipped a beat as she felt the first wave of nerves hit her. She took a deep breath and tried to steady her mind. It was now or never. She had to do this, for herself and for Daniel. The doors to the grand hall opened, and Sarah's bridesmaids walked down the aisle, one by one, their soft blue dresses flowing behind them like a gentle breeze. The guests rose to their feet, their eyes fixed on the beautiful women as they made their way toward the altar. Then it was Sarah's turn. She stepped forward, her breath catching in her throat as the room fell silent. All eyes were on her. With each step she took, she could feel her heart pounding louder in her chest. The gown felt heavier than ever, and the weight of the secret she carried under it seemed to grow with each passing moment. She looked straight ahead, focusing on Daniel, who was waiting for her at the altar. His face was filled with love and anticipation, but there was a flicker of uncertainty in his eyes, as if he sensed that something was off. As Sarah walked down the aisle, She couldn't help but notice how beautiful the hall looked, how perfect everything seemed. The flowers, the candles, the soft glow of the chandeliers. Everything was in place, just as she had imagined. But still, that nagging feeling in the pit of her stomach wouldn't go away. She wanted to turn back, to tell Daniel the truth, but she knew it wasn't the right time. The guests were smiling, whispering amongst themselves, admiring how stunning the bride looked. Sarah couldn't help but smile back at them, even though her mind was racing. She reached the altar, standing beside Daniel. The priest greeted them, and the ceremony began. As the priest spoke the traditional words of the wedding vows, Sarah's mind wandered. She tried to focus on the words, on what was happening in front of her, but all she could think about was the secret hidden under her dress, and how, in just a few moments, everything would change. The ceremony had begun, but Sarah could hardly focus on the words of the priest as they floated through the air. It was as though the entire room had faded into the background, and all that remained was the pounding of her heart and the pressing weight of the secret she had been carrying for weeks. She stood next to Daniel, her soon-to-be husband, looking into his eyes, but feeling like a million miles away from him. His smile was warm, his hand steady as he gently took hers. Yet the smile that seemed to warm the entire room couldn't reach Sarah's heart. The guests were all focused on the bride, admiring her beauty, whispering in soft voices, but Sarah could feel none of it. The wedding ceremony had always been something magical in her dreams, something that was supposed to fill her with joy and excitement. But today, it was overshadowed by the storm of thoughts swirling inside her. This was not the day she had envisioned. The weight of the secret under her dress made her feel both heavy and invisible at the same time. As the priest continued his prayer, Sarah couldn't shake the overwhelming sense of fear. What would happen when everything came to light? What would Daniel think? She had promised herself that she would keep this hidden for as long as possible. But how long could she keep a secret this big? How long could she pretend everything was normal? Her gaze shifted to the guests seated in front of her. The delicate sound of their whispers mixed with the soft chords of the organ playing in the background. Her mother's face appeared through the crowd, her expression full of pride and love. It was supposed to be the happiest day of Sarah's life, but the unease never left her. She could feel her pulse racing, her chest tightening with every second that passed. The dress she was wearing felt heavier than it ever had before, as if the fabric was trying to keep her tethered to this moment, unable to escape the truth that she so desperately wanted to keep hidden. The priest's words began to blur together. His voice was soothing, but Sarah couldn't focus on anything except the deep anxiety that was gnawing at her insides. She had never felt more alone in her entire life, even though she was surrounded by people who loved her. No one knew what was about to happen. No one knew what was hidden beneath the delicate layers of her wedding dress. Daniel squeezed her hand gently, his thumb brushing over her knuckles. He was so calm, so confident, but Sarah couldn't help but wonder if he knew something was off. Was there a flicker of doubt in his eyes, or was it just her imagination? She looked at him, trying to force a smile, but it felt fake. She couldn't bring herself to smile when her heart was racing and her mind was in chaos. The priest continued to speak of love and unity, of two souls coming together as one, and Sarah's thoughts began to drift. She thought of the days leading up to this moment, the moments of joy, the laughter shared between her and Daniel. She remembered the first time they met, the way his eyes lit up when he saw her, and how in those early days, everything felt so easy. There was no secret then, no weight that threatened to crush everything. But now, standing at the altar, Sarah knew that everything had changed. The moment of truth was approaching, and no matter how much she tried to push it away, it was impossible to escape the reality of the situation. She couldn't hide forever. "Do you, Daniel, take Sarah to be your lawfully wedded wife?" the priest asked, his voice breaking through her thoughts. Daniel's voice was steady and firm as he answered, "I do." His eyes sparkled with love as he looked at Sarah, and for a moment, she felt like everything might be okay. But the feeling didn't last long. The next question came, and Sarah's heart was in her throat. "Do you, Sarah, take Daniel to be your lawfully wedded husband?" The priest asked again, his eyes now focused entirely on Sarah. For a moment, Sarah froze. The world seemed to stop around her as she searched deep within herself for an answer. It wasn't that she didn't love Daniel. She did. She loved him more than anything. But there was something about this moment, something about standing in front of him, surrounded by everyone she cared about, that made her feel as though the weight of her secret was about to crush her. A tear slid down her cheek, and she quickly wiped it away, hoping no one noticed. "I do," she whispered, barely audible, but loud enough for Daniel to hear. He smiled at her, the expression full of joy, and the guests began to clap. But Sarah couldn't focus on the applause. She couldn't focus on anything except the fact that she had just promised herself to Daniel for the rest of her life, and that secret under her dress was still there, lurking, waiting for the right moment to come out. The ceremony continued, but Sarah's mind was in turmoil. She nodded along with the priest's words, repeating the vows, but her thoughts were elsewhere. She could feel her body stiffening under the weight of the dress, but she knew she couldn't back out now. She had made her commitment, and there was no turning back. She was going to marry Daniel, but she couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing, that the truth was too big to keep buried. The final blessing came, and the priest smiled warmly. "I now pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss the bride." Daniel leaned in and kissed Sarah softly, and for a brief moment, everything seemed perfect. The guests cheered and clapped, and Sarah forced herself to smile. But deep inside, she knew the truth, and she was no longer sure how much longer she could keep it a secret. The cheers and applause echoed through the grand hall as Daniel and Sarah shared their first kiss as husband and wife. The crowd erupted into a symphony of clapping, laughter, and well-wishing. The newlyweds stood at the altar, holding hands, their faces glowing with happiness. For a moment, everything seemed perfect. But for Sarah, a deep unease gnawed at her heart, and she could feel the weight of the secret beneath her dress pressing down on her more than ever. She had promised herself that the secret would remain hidden, at least for this one day, but it seemed like the universe had other plans. The day was supposed to be magical, filled with nothing but love and celebration. And yet, Sarah couldn't escape the overwhelming feeling that everything was about to change. It wasn't the wedding, or the vows, or the kiss. It was the secret she had kept buried under her dress, the one thing that could turn this day into a nightmare. As Daniel led her down the aisle, she could feel the stares of the guests, their eyes on her as they congratulated the happy couple, the bright smiles, the warm hugs. It all felt so far away, like she was living in a different world. She was grateful for the love, for the joy everyone was sharing, but she couldn't help but think about the truth. She had never expected things to go this way. It was supposed to be a simple wedding, a day to celebrate their love, but now it felt like it was all just a prelude to what was coming. The guests were still in the main hall, talking excitedly, taking pictures, and sipping champagne. Sarah and Daniel were whisked away to the side for a moment of quiet. They shared a private moment together, holding hands, gazing at one another with love in their eyes. But for Sarah, it wasn't the peaceful moment she had imagined. Instead, she could feel the tension in her chest, the secret that had been building for weeks, threatening to reveal itself. Her breath caught in her throat, and she fought to keep her composure. "I'm so glad we did this," Daniel said, his voice warm, as he held her close. "This day is everything I've dreamed of and more." Sarah forced a smile, trying to ignore the turmoil inside her. "I know," she whispered. "It's perfect." But even as she spoke those words, her mind was already racing. The secret she had been hiding, the thing she had kept from Daniel and everyone else, was waiting for the right moment to be exposed. She could feel the weight under her dress, a constant reminder of what she had been trying to avoid all day. She knew that, sooner or later, it would come out. As the newlyweds made their way toward the reception hall, Sarah's thoughts began to spiral. The guests had already begun their dancing, enjoying the music and laughter filling the air. The celebration continued, but Sarah couldn't shake the feeling of impending dread. Everything seemed so perfect, yet there was a storm building inside her. She had no idea how she was going to keep her secret any longer, especially now that it was becoming harder to breathe, harder to hold on. She wasn't sure if she could take it much longer. Then, it happened. As Sarah and Daniel were walking toward the dance floor for their first dance, she felt something shift within her. The secret, which she had kept hidden for so long, was no longer something she could ignore. She could feel it pressing against her, like a weight that had grown unbearable. The smile on her face faltered for a moment, but only for a split second. No one noticed, but Sarah knew, and Daniel did too. Just as they reached the center of the dance floor, something shifted in Sarah's dress. It wasn't obvious at first, but there was a sudden tension in the fabric, and the weight under her gown shifted. The moment was so fleeting, but it was enough to make Sarah freeze. She couldn't hide it any longer. It had been building, quietly, under the surface, but now, it was about to come to light. Daniel looked at her, his face filled with curiosity. "Are you okay?" he asked softly, sensing her sudden shift in demeanor. Sarah's eyes widened, panic rising in her chest. She had promised herself that she wouldn't let it happen like this, that she wouldn't let everything fall apart in the middle of their first dance. But here they were, surrounded by guests who had no idea what was going on beneath the surface. She could feel her heart racing as the truth slowly began to unravel. It was as if the universe had chosen this moment, this one perfect moment of their wedding, to reveal the secret she had hidden so carefully. Before she could stop herself, a small gasp escaped her lips as she felt something shift under her dress. The guests, who had been watching the couple, began to murmur quietly. Sarah's hands trembled, and she tried to force herself to stay calm, but it was no use. She knew that the time had come for the truth to be revealed. Daniel stepped back, confusion clouding his face as he looked down at her gown. He could see the sudden tension in Sarah's body, the way she had become rigid and pale. Something wasn't right, and Sarah knew it. I need to tell you something," Sarah whispered, her voice barely audible. Her heart raced in her chest as she prepared to say the words that would change everything. The truth she had been hiding under her dress, under her entire life, was about to come out, and she could no longer keep it in. The secret had grown too powerful, too undeniable. As Sarah opened her mouth to speak, the music stopped, and the guests turned their attention toward her. The eyes of everyone in the room were suddenly on her, and she knew that she could no longer run from the truth. The moment had arrived. The room was silent, every eye fixed on Sarah, as the weight of the moment hung heavy in the air. Sarah's heart raced, her hands trembling slightly as she stood in the center of the dance floor, her wedding dress flowing around her like a cloud of white fabric. It felt as though time had stopped, and all that mattered now was the secret she had kept hidden for so long. Daniel, standing just a few feet away from her, looked at her with confusion and concern. He had seen the change in her, her sudden stiffness, the fear in her eyes. He had no idea what was going on, but he knew something was terribly wrong. The joyous atmosphere of the reception had dissolved into a tense stillness as everyone waited for Sarah to speak. She could feel all eyes on her, but it was as if the whole world had faded away, leaving only her and Daniel in the spotlight. Her mind was a whirlwind. She had never imagined this would happen. She had thought she could keep the secret forever, that it would never come to light. But now, the truth was no longer something she could hide behind a veil of silence. It was out in the open, and there was no turning back. Sarah took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. She looked into Daniel's eyes, trying to find the strength to say what needed to be said. He was waiting for her, his gaze full of love, but also full of worry. He didn't understand, not yet, and that was what terrified her the most. "Daniel," she began, her voice shaky, there's something I've been hiding from you. Something I should have told you before today. But I couldn't. I was scared." Daniel's expression softened, his brow furrowing with concern. He took a small step toward her, reaching out his hand. "Sarah, whatever it is, you can tell me. You don't have to be afraid. We're in this together, remember." His voice was calm, filled with reassurance, but Sarah could see the worry in his eyes. He wanted to believe her, to trust her, but how could he understand something that was so deeply hidden? Sarah's lips trembled as she fought to find the right words. She had never imagined this moment would be so difficult. How could she explain everything? How could she make him understand why she had kept such an enormous secret from him, the man she had promised to spend the rest of her life with? "I've kept this from you because I thought you wouldn't understand," Sarah continued, her voice barely a whisper. "I thought you would think I was weak, or that it would change everything. But I can't hide it anymore." Her hands shook as she lifted the edge of her wedding dress, pulling back the fabric to reveal what she had been concealing. For a moment, the room seemed to hold its breath, and Sarah felt a pang of fear strike her chest. She had never imagined her wedding day would come to this, exposing her vulnerability in front of everyone she cared about. But the moment was here, and she had no choice but to face it. The guests, still in their seats, exchanged confused glances as they tried to make sense of what was happening. Sarah could feel their eyes on her, but it was Daniel's gaze that held her the most. He was standing still, his face a mixture of shock and disbelief as he looked down at what she had revealed. Under her dress, Sarah had hidden a small box, a delicate wooden box that had been with her for years. It was something that had meant the world to her, something that had been passed down through generations of women in her family. It was a symbol of strength, of resilience, a piece of her heritage that she had always kept close, hoping to one day share it with the one she loved. She held the box out to Daniel, her fingers trembling. This is my mother's heirloom. It's been passed down through my family for generations, and I've kept it hidden because I was afraid it would seem like too much. But now I know I was wrong. You deserve to know the truth about who I am, and what's been holding me together all these years." Daniel's face softened as he took the box from her hands, his eyes searching hers for understanding. For a moment, everything was still. The music had faded into the background, and the chatter of the guests had died down. All that mattered was the small box in Daniel's hands, and the truth that Sarah had kept hidden for so long. He opened the box slowly, revealing a small, delicate ring nestled inside. It was a family heirloom, passed down from mother to daughter for generations. It was a symbol of the strength and love that had been carried through time, a reminder that no matter what life threw their way, they could always hold on to the past for strength. Tears filled Daniel's eyes as he looked up at Sarah, his voice barely a whisper. "Sarah, I had no idea. I had no idea how much this meant to you, but I understand now. This isn't something to hide. This is a part of who you are. And I love you, all of you, the way you are." Sarah's heart swelled with relief as the weight she had been carrying for so long seemed to melt away. Daniel's words were the balm she had needed. He wasn't angry. He wasn't disappointed. He understood, and that made everything feel right again. She smiled through her tears, feeling the love and warmth in her chest, the love that had been there all along, waiting for the right moment to be revealed. "I'm sorry I kept it from you. I should have trusted you sooner." Daniel pulled her into his arms, holding her tightly. "There's nothing to apologize for. You don't have to hide anything from me, ever again. We'll face everything together." The music slowly began to play again, a soft melody that filled the room with warmth. The guests, who had been watching in silence, began to clap gently, sensing the emotion in the air. Sarah and Daniel stood together, their hands intertwined, and for the first time that day, Sarah felt the peace she had been longing for. The secret was no longer a burden. It was part of their story, and together, they could face anything. As they danced under the soft glow of the chandelier, Sarah knew that this day, the day that had started with so much fear, had ended in love and understanding. It was a day that would remain etched in her heart forever, not because of the secret she had kept, but because of the love that had brought her and Daniel closer than ever before. They were ready for whatever the future held, together.